shot at Pablo Escobar's accountant, who was my next door neighbor.
Story.
What?
Story like, how did you do it? Some story like a novel or a movie, you know? A spy story, come on.
All right,
Come
all
on, a
right.
spy story.
Okay, all right. Well, the best time to do an audio op is when they're building the building. And so you have a construction worker who basically pulls out the sample tiles, and then we prepare 2 or 3, and then they're installed as the tiling is being installed. It works. One of the constant problems we have is when you do install an audio device, you have to find an appropriate place to put the listening post, because you have path loss, you know, right, limitations depending on the neighborhood and the environment. So that's the second part of the challenge. The third part of the challenge is getting a listener transcriber who can be trusted to be attentive and yet filter out the 99% of the stuff that's garbage. You know, for every hour of tape, you're going to get at best 5 minutes of useful information if you're really lucky. It's closer to 1 minute. Good spying is very labor intensive. Good spying requires really excellent targeting. And most spying today is not worth the money we're paying for it. Another story, the last thing you want to do in the middle of the night in a country with trigger-happy policemen is run a roadblock at 2 in the morning. In alias, in a car rented in alias. But it helps if you've broken the rules and still have your diplomatic passport with you. So I got out of a scrape there. My worst experience as a spy, I was responsible for penetrating the extreme left in El Salvador. And the colonels in charge of the country thought that I was a leftist sympathizer and threatened to kill me. It's really causes you concern when the colonels in charge of a third world country have come to you and said, we're going to kill you. And so I went underground and got an administrative message from the CIA a day later saying, we're already paying for your house. We can't pay for a hotel at the same time. And we sent back a message, what part of assassination don't you understand? You know, so that was scary. By and large, I think spying is like being a cop. I mean, it's 90% boredom and 10% terror. And usually the terror is being induced for the wrong reasons today. There are some pretty good things. I think some of the spying that we did on the Soviet Union, in theory, saved us billions and billions of dollars. There's no question in my mind that CIA has paid for itself with its occasional successes. But by and large, unfortunately, too much of spying today is about cocktail parties and false recruitments and playing the numbers game and reporting stuff that's completely out of context. I actually did an assessment. I was responsible for counterintelligence against a denied area target. And I did an assessment of where that target was present all over the world and then how well we had done against it. Nobody was paying attention to it. Nobody was being held accountable for that stuff. Another true story, just to show you how bad our records are. When I took over that account, I said, all right, give me a list of all the people we know. And they came back with 200 names. I said, this can't be right. I've reported this many just in one tour from one place. So we hired an annuitant to go through all the hard copy files. We ended up, instead of 200 names, we ended up with 3,200 names. So then we asked ourselves, why is it that 3,000 of these names haven't been indexed? So we go down in the basement. Well, it turns out the weak link in CIA is the GS1 barely high school educated clerks responsible for transferring information from messages into the microfiche. So at the end of every CIA message, we say, a field message, we say index all names. And so these girls, all of whom had a chip on their shoulder, an attitude for being very poorly paid and basically doing this work, if a message said index all names, it had 1 to 3 names on it, they'd do it. If it were a prisoner or a defector interrogation and it had 50 or 100 names, they'd say shit and move it to the outbox without processing it. That's the weak link in our national intelligence community. The same problem exists at the FBI. It's another spy story. well, another spy story, and this actually goes to this incompetence thing. We captured a terrorist once, and the National Guard did us the favor of beating him into a bloody pulp, and came up to me with 50 names of his contacts, PLO contacts, all the way down from Canada through Latin America. So we sent a night action to the FBI. This was considered a very high priority potential plot kind of thing. And the FBI came back immediately with no traces. Well, 80% of the FBI's information is in paper form. And I know they didn't call someone in to go through the paper at night. So it took me 2 weeks to get the legal attaché to send in the traces if it were her own, and they came back with a 3-page arrest report in the United States and the fact that he'd been expelled from Canada. Okay? I was one of the 2 officers assigned terrorism a full-time target at that time, and the FBI was basically telling the CIA, stick it in your ear, we don't really care about supporting you on terrorism. Okay? Next person.
Thank you.
Wait, haven't you already asked a question?
I did ask one before, but...
All right, let's get someone who hasn't asked one before. All right, I'll tell you what, you just... All right, all right.
It's a quick one. It's not like asking somebody to say stories for half an hour. What do you think is the plausibility of this story that's, or the premise of this story that's being reported in the New Republic, I think, that 4 high-ranking Pakistani intelligence officials were being pressured by the White House to capture bin Laden before the election, but more specifically during the week of the Democratic National Convention?
I don't know if they cut it that close, but I have from multiple open sources that the original plan was that the Pakistanis would capture bin Laden and would turn him over covertly southwest of Jalalabad in Afghanistan in the late July timeframe for the purpose of making it appear that the U.S. had caught him and not alienating the Muslims. I have new separate open sources that say that Pakistan is reconsidering the deal. And basically, bin Laden is one of 2 heroes in Pakistan. The other one is the nuclear guy. And I think the Americans are extremely naive and foolish to believe that bin Laden will be turned over by Pakistan. I do believe that shortly after the Pakistanis started bulldozing villages in the Waziristan area, which I'm intimately familiar with from open source work that we've done, down to tribal studies and biographies with photos of village elders. I do believe that the Pakistanis very quickly took protective possession of bin Laden after they started bulldozing the villages. I believe, my personal speculation, is that he is in a very comfortable guest house in Pakistan as an honored guest of the Pakistani government, and that his lieutenants are being allowed to fly freely in and out of Pakistan on commercial aircraft without any interruption. I don't know for sure, but Howard Bloom has a multi-person research effort going. The Pakistanis have 3 French Aegis submarines that are nuclear potential, and the Pakistanis have only been building nuclear missiles for submarines. And Howard is very carefully examining, and I have shared this with the Chief of Naval Operations, very carefully examining the possibility that the radical elements of the Pakistani military and the ISI have already agreed to let bin Laden hijack one of these submarines and get far enough out past Sri Lanka to be able to nuke Bahrain. I think we are extremely foolish if we underestimate bin Laden's strategic genius.
Thank you.
2 questions. First one is, I heard a story about how when the U.S. Embassy was built in, or I can't remember if it was multiple, but a U.S. Embassy built in Russia, the problem was you couldn't import all the materials in, so you had to mine it locally.
Oh, they wired the place.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying, because I heard they put in like random transistors and stuff.
Yeah, but the Chinese did it better. The Chinese knew we had metal detectors, so they used ceramics.
And they vibrate or so?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you know, a ceramic channel from here to there. And then there's a little Chinese guy squatting down there listening. No, actually, if you read, I'm serious, they did, it was masterful. They did ceramics. But if you read Jim Bamford's book, Body of Secrets, or I think it's Body of Secrets, he talks about the 5,000-person North Vietnamese signals intelligence group. And these people were digging tunnels up under the G3 sections of Bien Hoa Air Base and other places, and they were actually sending a North Vietnamese guy fluent in English to camp under the G3 shop. And I have never met a U.S. general that is actually willing to use an encrypted phone. These guys define arrogance. And so they're all blowing all these missions in the clear and having conversations from their generals' helicopters and things like that. The North Vietnamese beat our ass in part because they had really superior signals intelligence.
The other one is, I remember listening earlier when you were saying about, like, I guess you're half jokingly saying about how you probably have a picture of all of us and whatnot, and I was wondering whether or not you did it, how would you go along about getting everyone's photo here, background information? What would you do to bug the entire place or track everyone's conversation? I mean,
It wouldn't be worth it.
Well, but I mean, if it, in theory that you did it, not worth it or not, what would you do? And then background checks in the process.
In theory, there's a camera in one of these grills, and there's a guy in a remote collection who's systematically taking each of your pictures. Then there's a program called Face Trace, and we just run that against all the DMV records and try and get some matches there. We check all the hotel records in the area. We have 2 or 3 surveillance that are, I mean, you guys got to change colors, black is kind of obvious. Okay, yeah, he's undercover. And I think within a couple of weeks, over the course of 6 years, it would be a fairly simple matter to have a directory, but I don't think it's really that worth it. At least 10 of you are agents for the U.S. government. I, honest to God, one of the neat things about my life is that I'm a spy who can say it doesn't work, okay? And that's what makes me cool about open source intelligence. I'm not a librarian saying, please use the library. And so it really wouldn't be worthwhile. As a matter of fact, I think, I've said this before, in fact, it wasn't here, but at one of the first InfoWar cons, I debated, might even have been, I don't think it was Vint Cerf, but it might have been Vint Cerf. I debated someone on the question of, are hackers pathological scum or a national resource? And I think the group, which was 50% government, 50% hackers, I think divided in an even tie. But one of the things that I believe is that hackers are a national resource. And I think that the government fears I'm doing that just so you won't put ice cubes in my air conditioner duct like you did the first year. But the government fears what it doesn't understand. And the government doesn't understand most of the world, including its own domestic issues and potentials. Next person.
Thank you so much.
I've already asked a question. May I ask another?
Yeah.
All right. You discussed Sudan several times. You've at least brought it up. And I studied Sudan quite a bit for a political science class on the way to my math degree.
Did you read White Nile, Black Blood?
No, and I probably should have. In fact, I ended up not doing, the research I thought was pretty good, in retrospect, not so great. But I found my best resource for current events was, rather than news or any public source, were NGOs.
Yeah, I will take more, thank you. Go on.
NGOs like Human Rights Watch. They seem to have people on the ground really watching who's being hurt today, if nothing else. Do you find them to be a useful resource in the intelligence community?
Like anything else, it's funny. I was not a good economics student, but I learned I could always get A's on my comparative economics exam, because whenever the question is, should you use the market model or the command model for this problem, the answer is always a little of each, or both. NGOs are mixed. First off, some NGO people are extremely, acutely sensitive, aware, informed, and knowledgeable. However, a large number of them are young people that are very stupid and like to drink beer. And so there's an NGO party culture. And a lot of these people, thank you, a lot of these people are out of touch. They're just basically there to be a glorified Peace Corps person and have something to talk to, and they're unemployable anywhere else. So like anything else, every single organization, every single group of people is a mixed bag. And a big part of the human challenge is figuring out which ones actually know what they're talking about. For example, for Indonesia, I have an Australian Army corporal that calls around to the NGOs, and he's got a list of people that basically have proven knowledgeable and are willing to talk, and he chats them up, and in Indonesian from Australia. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think we're going to stop here in about 4 minutes.
I'll try to make these quick. Also, they may not be within your expertise. This year, the U.S. Navy's done something unusual where they've actually gotten 10 of their 12 carrier groups out into sea all at the same time. 7 of them, which are patrolling around the Pacific right now. You want to speculate any ideas what they might be doing?
I'll speculate. I don't think Taiwan is going to become a flashpoint. I think Bush is vulnerable on a number of fronts. And I don't think we want to pick a fight with China right now. But addressing the Taiwan thing with a presence is one of them. Providing platforms for special forces insertion from offshore and visible points is another one. There is real concern about the Philippines and Indonesia exploding. The Straits of Malacca is a disaster waiting to happen. But I also think that the Navy leadership has been very ineffective. I believe the minimal Navy that the United States needs is 450 ships, including a humanitarian assistance fleet and a brown water fleet. And the U.S. Navy admirals are making do with 320 ships of the wrong size. And as a result, we're 6 days away from anywhere because of that.
Well, I guess what's bothering me about the whole thing is it's actually a very difficult thing to do, even for the United States
Sure it is.
Navy.
We're supposed to have one out, one in cycle, and one back.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very costly thing to do. They've decided they're going to do this now, over the summer. And I'm just, it doesn't seem like they're just going out there just to make sure that the Straits of Malacca
I have
is
no
gonna be clear
special
and all
knowledge.
there. Okay. Well, the last question is also maybe not be in your expertise. I guess I don't quite understand why, I guess the United States government is so heavy in terms of, arranging their Navy around carrier groups where, if they were going to be used in a major action, say against China or something like that, basically a couple of sea-skimming missiles with tactical nukes could take out the whole
Carriers
group.
provide the fastest, most efficient way of transferring money from your pocket to the military-industrial complex. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would you say that Saddam Hussein was tracked down and captured the way it was reported in the media, or were there other entities involved that were not disclosed in the media?
I don't have special or privileged knowledge, but all of the reporting that I'm seeing, including informal emails from special forces people in Iraq, are that the national intelligence community had nothing to do with capturing Saddam Hussein. This was, in fact, some very talented reservists that moved I-2, the link analysis program, into the field, and they were on top of every person being debriefed, and they cross-hatched Saddam's family network, which was already known, with defector reports on sightings and other things, and they basically were able to get into the general area, and then Saddam's guards freaked out and abandoned him, and they're running away. They completely missed it. They were at the wrong place. And then when the guards bolted, they drew the attention of the special unit to this little place, and then God bless the alert military guy that realized that he had a styrofoam fake cover. Had the guards done a better job of covering it up, I don't think we would have found him. Very, very expensive manhunt. Yes, sir.
It's more a generic question, but it's obvious what you think of the current administration, but do you think that currently the combination of the liberal media, like Fahrenheit 9/11, Air America Radio, all the publications and books that have come out recently that have been more, I would say, bipartisan than usual all of a sudden will have the effect that you would like to see in the next election?
The short answer is no. If I were John Kerry, I would be cutting the spines off every single one of those books and massively indexing them and then visualizing all of that information. I would have a grand vision for coalition government. I would have a grand vision for very specific solutions for each of no fewer than 21 issues, say 7 national security, 7 domestic, 7 electoral privacy constitutional issues. and I'd be somewhat organized. I think Kerry is the last loser of the Clinton era. Between his staff and his advisors and his mediocre information technology, I am receiving absolutely abysmal crap from his campaign. I got a washed out, badly printed selection of quotes on national security from John, and some 12-year-old girl had written at the bottom, "Dear Robert, I know you're concerned about national security. Here's some information that bears on your interests. Love, Angela." Excuse me, fuck me.
Well, my question isn't what you think about Kerry, but do you think the media and the focus, which has mostly been against Bush and not in support of Kerry?
Wait, what media
will
has
help?
been against Bush?
Huh?
Not CNN, not the New
Well,
York
no,
Times.
No. All the books, the liberal media has come out much stronger
What
than
liberal
it has
media?
previously. Well,
I mean,
Okay.
name one major
Okay,
authentic
okay.
liberal
Well, not-
media, other than Seymour
I'm
Hersh.
talking about new stuff, like Fahrenheit 9/11.
You know,
um,
that might make some impact,
Air-
but frankly,
Air
I don't think it
America,
will. Joe
all
and
the-
Jane
all the
Sixpack
books.
are not going to see Fahrenheit 9/11. Neither are the working poor. Neither are the Cubans and the Hispanics.
Okay, but
And oh, by the way, the Muslims are in the majority now.
Right.
And I'm not at all sure that Kerry is doing a decent job of addressing them.
right.
You know what? I wrote an article on greaterdemocracy.org saying that if the vote were held today, I would vote for Bush. And my point, which certainly outraged one or two people, my point is that Kerry right now is a placebo. He is a disorganized mess. And although John Edwards is a shining light for the future, right now, in terms of the larger strategic picture, I'd rather have Bush pissing off the world for another 4 years than John Kerry pretending to put a Band-Aid on it. Okay? Kerry isn't even close to winning this election, in my judgment, because well, let's start with his haircut, okay? That is the most fucked up haircut I have ever seen on a presidential candidate. I mean, that guy has gone one moose too far. His wife is a bitch who has told him publicly in front of senators when he said, come on over to my house, she has said, John, it's my house. Okay? We're talking world-class bitch here. Rich bitch. He's Jewish, he's French. You know, I actually did a study of all the Republican attack possibilities on Kerry, and they are almost endless. If John Kerry doesn't get his shit together in the next 30 to 60 days, he's history. Yeah, he's toast, really. And it's a shame, because this country deserves great leadership. But John Kerry isn't good enough to lead this country by himself. He's got to pick a coalition team, and he's got to get the Greens, the Libertarians, the Independents, and the 25% of the moderate Republicans like me that want to vote for something different. He's got to get us on board, and he hasn't even taken the first baby step in that direction. All right, why don't we, one more, you two guys, and then we'll stop there.
What do all these spy agencies think of stations like WBAI and all our call-in comments and everything like that?
I think they ignore them and they're unaware of them.
Have you ever thought of running for office?
I don't know. You know, unfortunately, you guys are, somebody give me a good number, n to the minus 15th of the U.S. population. I don't think I would have the same appeal to Joe and Jane Sixpack, although I do get resonance. I'll tell you, there are direct leaders and there are indirect leaders. Direct leaders are really good at political schmoozing and all of that stuff. I mean, you guys bring out the best in me in some ways. But I am more of an indirect thought leader and reader and thinker, and I would probably be best as a special assistant to John Edwards. And frankly, I hope that if Kerry were successful in winning, I hope Edwards will not make the mistake that Al Gore did. Al Gore and Leon Firth blew it. They had 8 years in which to set up the infrastructure for a follow-on victory, and Leon Firth got really fat and really ignorant trying to keep up with the minutia of day-to-day national intelligence, national security. If Edwards comes in, he should not focus on being deputy president. He should be focusing on training and equipping the bureaucracy to basically implement reforms that will take 16 to 25 years to see through. He has to take the long term. It is my hope, although I don't expect it to happen. Nader doesn't play well with others. Kerry is not willing to make concessions to Nader. I think the Libertarians and the Greens are basically trash this year. The Independents have no leadership, and the moderate Republicans have not been able to find leadership, although there is now sort of a bubbling surge of blackmailing Bush into some very specific compromises for the moderate Republicans are starting to rebel on the Hill and elsewhere. And I think Karl Rove has already decided Cheney has to go. And unfortunately, I think America is stupid enough to elect Giuliani Bush and maybe move Sean O'Keefe over to defense. John Lehman will be a disaster at CIA. I don't think that we will make many intelligent policy choices in 4 more years under Bush. But I will vote for Bush. No, I'm going to stop. I will vote for Bush if Kerry doesn't get his shit together. Let's end on that note. Good night.